all I can say from here is that that was what she was requesting at the time, and I was trying to respect that she felt some degree of power. Now, that's all I can say that I would have tried to do in some way.
Looking back on that, do you see now that that was inappropriate to put it on a young girl who had been raped by her father, that it was her decision as to whether or not he was reported to the police?
Well, I see that I conflict with myself. I contradicted myself at times because there were times when I forbid contact and that I talked about how dangerous it was, and then I've allowed her to make a decision.
So can you see yourself that as a practitioner at that stage you felt confused and conflicted as to how to deal with BGD?
Probably, yes.
And do you think that that confusion and confliction would have been particularly difficult for her in those circumstances?
Yes, I think so. It must have been.
And added to the confusion that she felt about what to do about her father?
I really can't honestly answer why I would have said that.
Dr Groom, is one interpretation that you had
said that I wouldn't tell the father, but reading through the sequence of documents, I think it came to the situation where there needed to be some sort of confrontation of the father, that the system knew about it, because there have been so many people talking about it in the system from what I can see, that I suppose it's quite possible that some of this information would have got out anyway.
So do you recall then speaking to a father?
No, I don't.
Just before I move on from that comment, can you see now, looking back on it, that it was extremely difficult for BGD living in fear and not knowing whether or not somebody would discuss the matter with her father?
Well, there's a whole lot of my written notes where we talked about her fear.
And that caused her serious angst?
Yes.
And at the same time that caused her angst, she was being sent these mixed messages as to whether she should or shouldn't see her father.
Yeah.
So you referred earlier to a memorandum which is dated the 13th of June 1979 from Maryland Minister, and I'll just note it for the record, it's DHS.3002.323.0275_E_R, and that records that BGD's father rang her yesterday to ask permission to visit BGD today, and permission was granted.
Yes.
Even though the last visit had been completely inappropriate,
yes.
where he was clearly being sensual, in inverted commas, towards his daughter.
Yes.
When you look back at that now, are you shocked, outraged, disgusted that that occurred? How do you feel about it?
Well, I said to you before that I felt quite angry about that.
It put that child in serious jeopardy
yes.
of being abused again by a father.
Well, I can't remember where I read it. There was something about that she and her father were in I think it was a dining room or somewhere, and there was a youth officer present, but that there was no intervention by the youth officer, and there was something about the father making threats to her verbally, as well as, I think, putting his hand on her thigh and squeezing it or something, and telling her to well, shut up. Or words stronger than that, I think. And, you know, reading all that, I find that lack of supervision, adequate supervision, and the whole decision-making process, I've found, you know, reading that back over now, I find that quite disturbing.
You will have heard BGD give evidence yesterday that time, or that her memory of her father visiting her in Winlaton, she feels, do you recall?
Yes.
One of the great betrayals of her life.
Yes.
How does that make you feel when you hear
Terrible.
She feels let down by the system and people who were part of the system. You accept that you were part of the system.
I was part of the system, yes.
And you accept that the system and those who were part of it did let her down.
Yes.
Dr. Groom, at BGD 19, there's a handwritten note from yourself on the 20th of June 1979. It's for the record DHS.3002.323.0274_E_R. Now, prior to this, on the 14th of June 1979, you had allowed BGD to have weekend leave if her mother requested it. Did it occur to you that BGD might be subject to sexual abuse when she went out on leave?
Not at the time. I'm trying to recall the situation because I don't believe her parents were together at the time. I believe they were both living in separate places, and there was an understanding or whatever that going home to her mother would be a safe situation, or a relatively safe situation.
Did anybody check on that?
I don't know.
Whose responsibility would have been to check whether or not she was going to be safe on weekend leave?
I can't really say whether that would be someone like the liaison social worker or whether it might be just the senior youth officer responsible for her.
Given you were the one making decisions or contributing to them about whether or not, I withdraw that, given you were the one making recommendations as to whether or not the child should have weekend leave, wouldn't you have checked whether or not she was going to be safe in that placement?
I think I would have. I think I had met with her mother, or at least spoken to her on the phone, and she had some degree of undertaking of having some degree of responsibility for her.
Okay.
But I can't sort of really see what actual practical supervision there would have been.
But prior to the 20th of June, you had assumed that she would have been away from her father if she went out on weekend leave with her mum. Is that fair?
That was her request, as I recall, that she didn't want to see her father, but then on the other hand she did.
But it was your intention at that stage that she be kept away from her father, was it?
Certainly.
So can I show you a document which is dated the 20th of June 1979? It's the reference I referred to earlier, ending in 0274_E_R. Could you read that onto the record for us, Doctor?
This is the bad weekend one?
Yes, please.
Bad weekend. Father made sexual advances which she refused. She feels guilty having left him and wonders whether he's admitted himself to Plenty, which is a psychiatric hospital at the time. He had asked her to run away to New South Wales. She managed to refuse. It didn't work out at home and she doesn't want to go home. All they want me for is what they can get out of me. But quotations again. I hate being in this hole, unquote. Although it represents security because she came back to Winlaton instead of absconding at the weekend. I teased her about her anger and her sitting with her back to me. I managed to break through some of her angry facade and get her smiling. See her again next week, MJG.
So by this time, the 20th of June 1979, you became aware that she would not be safe on weekend leave with her mother, correct?
I did, yes.
And you became aware that she had been the victim of sexual abuse by her father on that weekend away?
Or reading from that, yes.
You now had plenty of information that he was somebody who had psychiatric problems. He still intended to make sexual advances on his daughter, and she was going to be at risk if she was let out. Did you give any consideration at that stage to reporting the matter to police?
I was discussing the progress in the case management board of meetings they were called, where everything concerning her would have been discussed. I would probably have expressed my concerns about it, and I think increasingly I was saying that she shouldn't see her father at all. But in terms of actual legal charges, I can't see anything that I've said there that where I recommended it, and that's all I can go on.
Is it fair to say that there was not a culture at that stage of reporting sexual abuse of children to police?
Well, certainly there wasn't mandatory reporting, and I don't believe there was either. I think in some situations it seemed to happen. I mean, because with BGD's situation, her mother's partner was charged.
But you don't recall ever reporting a matter to the police, do you?
Not in this, no, not this, no.
With any child?
I think there would have been situations where I mean, there are people that I saw at the clinic where that would have happened. I would have recommended to the magistrate.
Was there a distinction drawn in 1979 in your mind, or in practice generally, between public crime and private crime? So that because this child was being raped by her father, then it was dealt with differently?
All I can say is that often in psychiatric services in those days, there was an attempt to work with families a lot. There was a strong movement in the late 60s and 70s and into the 80s, I suppose, where the emphasis was on family therapy.
Rather than reporting perpetrators to police if they were within the family?
Certainly.
You note at the bottom that of this statement, I teased her about her anger and sitting with her back to me. You can perfectly understand why that child would have felt angry and confused when she came back to Winlaton, having been sexually abused by her father at the weekend.
Yes, reading that, it probably doesn't sound terribly favourable towards me, but in terms of engagement with young people, sometimes one does use humour to try and break through, say, an angry defence. And that was what that referred to.
Sure.
And in fact, she had it back to me as I read this.
And in fact, it was effective to get her to smile, to turn around and start smiling, clearly.
Yeah.
She was a child who appeared to want to engage with you.
Yes.
Dr. Graham. But do you agree with me that looking back on that now, that reflects a trivialisation of what had actually occurred to her at the weekend?
No, I don't agree with that. I don't believe that I saw that particular effort at engagement as trivialising what had happened to her.
Do you agree that you did not appropriately deal with the gravity of the situation as it was then?
In that particular situation, I don't believe so. If you're referring to my teasing her as meaning that I didn't appreciate the gravity of it. That was a separate thing. She was putting on an angry defence to me as I would see it, and I was trying to break through that anger. It wasn't that I decreased in value my sense of the importance of a situation like this as I read it.
At that point, though, I accept what you're saying in relation to your particular efforts to tease her there and bring her back.
I've often done this.
But at no stage after she disclosed that abuse of her on the weekend did you inform the police or ensure that she was kept away from her father in the future?
I can't see the sequences, but from reading here, I believe that I did say that she shouldn't be seeing her father.
But do you think, looking back, that what you should have done is made sure the police were informed there so that the father was charged with a criminal offence and kept away from his daughter?
Yes.
And that wasn't done?
That wasn't done.
That suggests it wasn't dealt with the appropriate gravity.
No.
You agree with that?
I agree with that.
And the explanation for that is what you told us earlier, that in 1979 you were dealing with this idea of an incestuous relationship, a rape within the family, differently to the way you would have dealt with it had it been a rape by a neighbour or someone outside the family.
I thought I said that I would see it as equally serious.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I thought that I had said that I saw both as equally serious.
Yes, but that if she had reported to you that she'd been raped by a neighbour at the weekend, you would have dealt with that quite differently, wouldn't you?
I don't believe so.
You wouldn't necessarily have reported her to the police?
I don't think I would have. It would still be something that would have to be decided upon. It wasn't as if, as a visiting consultant or whatever you wanted to call me in those days, that I made recommendations about movements and contacts with family members and so on, but I didn't perceive myself, I don't believe, as being the person who was responsible. She was a ward of the state. The department was responsible for those decisions. I would make recommendations about what should be done in terms of contact with the family and so on, but I don't think that overall it was my responsibility to report that to the police. This was something that was happening in the context of her being a ward and under the care of the Department of Community Welfare Services.
You had a duty of care to that child.
I had a duty of care, and I saw my duty of care as trying to assist her to come to terms with the whole situation.
Was part of your duty of care to keep her safe from any rape?
And that's why I recommended that she shouldn't have contact with the father, and that's why she complains sometimes, as I see it, that I wouldn't allow her to.
Did you ever recommend to any of her caseworkers that the police be informed so that it would ensure that her father would be kept away from her? I
can't see from my papers that I did recommend that.
At BGD 20, which is DHS.3002.323.0253_E_R, there's another handwritten note from yourself dated the 26th of June.
Yes.
It notes there the visit to the clinic of BGE, who is BGD's mother, BGS, who is BGD's grandmother, and BGR, who is BGD's grandfather. Do we take it that you arranged for that visit from those family members?
From reading from that, I take it, yes.
You allowed them to talk about BGD's life history?
Yes.
And they gave you a long detailed notes of the same?
Yes.
They asked questions in relation to BGD's management?
Yes.
You told them BGD is very confused at present and needs time to sort some of her feelings out. She'll be in Winlaton for some time until we find a suitable placement, as Kildonan
Yes.
won't have her back. After a long discussion re BGD's life and their hedging around about her and her father, and asked BGE, that's her mum, if she was aware of the father making sexual advances towards BGD. BGE said she had suspected it. Do you remember any of that now you read it?
I honestly can't say that I remember it. I'm reading that, and I obviously wrote that, but I can't say that I remember that situation.
Okay. BGE, the mother, goes on to say, you note, she didn't show any dramatic, perceptible upset. Read this. I told them I was available to contact if they wanted to. They appreciated this and felt a lot happier and clearer about where things were going.
Yes.
You note in there that you asked BGE, the mother, if she was aware of BGG, the father, making sexual advances towards BGD. Yes. Do you agree that that underplayed what was actually happening to BGD?
My understanding as reading that would be that I would have been feeling very sensitive about how to raise the topic. And I raised this, as I see, as sexual advances, and then I would, and I've done this on other occasions where I'm gently trying to introduce something that's quite dramatic and quite traumatic to someone to see what the reaction would be. And so I go on that here, that I raised it as sexual advances rather than saying straight out rape, just because I didn't want to actually come out and say that. It was raising it as an issue and to see if I could then take it further and in terms of being more explicit about it.
Is it possible that you actually saw this as a sexual advance from a father on his daughter rather than a rape?
No.
Why not then just explain to them the full gravity of the situation, that this child is being raped by father?
I can't say from those notes how far I would have gone in terms of discussing the detail of that. Those notes are probably inadequate in describing how much further I would have talked about that.
Do you agree that unless you reinforce the gravity with this group, this family members, there's a chance that they won't take it seriously themselves in protecting the child?
No, I don't think so, because I think that the mother seemed to me from reading that as if she'd accepted it as a fact.
But were you concerned by the fact that she didn't show any dramatic perceptible upset?
I was concerned about that, yes.
Why is there no note here about BGD being sexually abused when she went home for the weekend prior? See, the note on the 20th of June 1979 is a note where she'd had a bad weekend and the father had made sexual advances. Why is there no note when you see the mother, the grandfather and the grandmother about how he was allowed access to her the weekend prior?
I can't answer that.
Does that suggest to you that you may not have done enough to find out what risks there were to her on a weekend?
I really can't answer that. I could have and may not have gone into the detail of it in my notes. Either way, I appreciate it can be seen as inadequate.
Did you make any recommendation to anybody after finding out that BGD had been sexually abused on a weekend with her mother that she must not go home to that placement?
Sorry.
Until it could be made clear that the father would not have access?
From looking at the notes, I think I did.
Can you turn to BGD 21? There's a note from the 27th of June. So the day after you see BGD's mother, father and grandfather, you told her about yesterday's interview and that you discussed BGD and her father's sexual relationship. She hit the roof. That suggests, doesn't it, that you had previously told her that you wouldn't discuss that sexual relationship? She goes on to say she hit the roof and said it just goes to show people can't be trusted, etc.
Yep.
She then calmed down and expressed fear of what father will do to her.
Yeah, before that, I pointed out that I merely brought out into the open what it seems people have been whispering into each other about anyway. She calmed down and expressed fear of what father will do to her. Also, her feelings of wanting to get out of here in spite of the security it gives.
Could you go on to read the rest of that note?
I queried whether she wanted to talk re anything much else. There were things, but not now, she said. I did not pursue it, and we spoke for a while re fears of what father might do to me or her. These fears seem pretty reality-based in that she says it is impossible to know how he will react from day to day. He is so unpredictable. She also feared that someone might talk mother into taking legal action against father. She also wanted mother to visit her this weekend. I said I'd phone and tell mother it was imperative to her emotional health that no legal action be taken, and also to ask mother to come and visit. I did this while BGD was present. Mother assured me she wouldn't do this and understood the effect it would be having on BGD.
And over the page it continues, I felt she was somewhat depressed, re BGE, her mother, and her father, but I didn't have the opportunity to pursue it then. I was also told BGD would make one more attempt to contact her father to arrange an appointment. Sorry, I also told BGD I would make one more attempt to contact her father to make an appointment. She appeared more settled and didn't want to discuss anything else. Do you see there that you again allowed BGD to take the decision-making as to whether or not there was a report made to the police about her father?
Yes, I suppose so.
So without a clear policy in place as to when matters should be reported to the police, it falls to the child then to feel responsible for that?
Yes.
And that's totally inappropriate, isn't it? Mm. Sorry, you just need to say...
Yes, sorry.
She was expressing here fear of her father and what he would do to her and potentially you.
Yes.
You took those fears seriously, didn't you?
I did.
You thought they were legitimate fears?
Yes.
You would have thought that, particularly knowing that he'd been in a psychiatric ward and was an unstable character?
Certainly.
What was done to protect BGD from being physically or sexually abused again by her father?
I can't say what was actually done. I can't remember the sequence now, but reading some of the planning meeting reports and some of the things that I've written, I believe that I recommended that she not have any contact with him.
So we know that in the absence, I'll take you to some further documents shortly, but we know that in the absence of going to the police, the only thing to protect her was her mother and her grandparents being engaged to try and help keep her away from her dad.
Yes, apart from the security of Winlaton.
So you must have wanted to, sorry, once she was released from Winlaton.
Oh, okay, sorry, yes.
And did you assume then that Winlaton would forbid any further visits from her father?
But my understanding is that she wasn't released. She was on weekend leave to the mother and grandparents, but I thought she was released to a hostel.
At that stage, as at the 26th of July, just get my date right, as at the 27th of June when you were speaking with her, she was still at Winlaton?
Yes, yes,
A decision was made not to go to the police at that stage, correct?
yes, yes.
And a decision was made clearly to try and engage her mother and her grandparents in her future, correct?
Indeed, yes.
And a decision was made that they would be they would be integral to keeping her safe from her father in the future, correct?
I wouldn't agree that they would have been relied upon totally.
Well, who was going to keep her safe then when she was released from a home?
Well, I don't believe that she was discharged from wardship until some time afterwards. So in some way the Regional Community Welfare Service would be responsible for supervising her when she left Winlaton.
But did you make any recommendations for her? She was still in a group home, she was still going to get weekend leave. Who was going to help keep her safe from her father? If it wasn't the mother or grandparents or the police?
The staff in the group home.
What about when she was released on leave?
My understanding would have been that it would have been the regional service.
Wouldn't you make any recommendations in that regard?
Well, I would have thought that I did. I can't remember what I've read there, but I would have made recommendations to staff about what she should and shouldn't be doing and how they should respond to her.
And would you have felt any responsibility for following that up to make sure those recommendations were implemented and that she was not then being accessed by her father?
I'm trying to remember what I've read here, and my understanding is that at times I would have visited wherever it was that she was. You just said something about Kildonnan. That's right, she was at Hillview and Lionel Hall. And it's got there, this is DHS 3002-232-0078B, that the hostel was to encourage her to continue, hostel to clarify regularity of contact with Michael Groom, suggest fortnightly rather than weekly contacts, and that she was becoming more mature and less manipulative, but is still very free in giving advice to less self-assured residents. There's a whole lot of...
Did you continue to see her at Hillview?
Well, according to this, I did. And I'm trying to remember whether I would have actually visited at Hillview or whether I saw her at the clinic, because there are some notes that seem to refer to me having seen her at the clinic. Now, somewhere else I think there was something about those visits being somewhat irregular.
If you just allow me to come to that, Dr. Groom, and if I don't come to it, I'll get you back there.
Yeah.
Did you become aware that the mother wrote the father a letter following your visit with the mother and grandparents?
I can't recall anything about that.
If you have a look at BGD 23, which is DHS.3002.323.0089_E_R, you see there a note, Dear BGG, that's the Dear Father, and it's signed Regards BGE Mother. I'm not suggesting you did have access to this, I'm just asking you to take the opportunity to read it now.
I don't believe that was included in the documents supplied to me either.
I see. You could just take the opportunity to read it now. Do you see there that what the mother wrote to the father, halfway down the page, did you know BGD has implicated you? I know you don't want anything to do with me, but I feel it's to your own benefit that in the future, you contact me. And she goes on. So you would appreciate from that in fact the mother informed the father following your visit with her that BGD had implicated him.
But before that, as I understand it, I saw him myself.
I'll come back to you seeing the father. When you read this letter, does it underscore the fact that the mother was not the one who should have been entrusted to keep BGD safe?
Yes, I can see what you're saying there.
Did you know that the mother had herself been in the psychiatric ward for a period of time?
Yes.
And did you understand that the mother and father had in fact, I think, met in the psychiatric ward?
Yes.
Why then would you leave it for the mother to be responsible for trying to keep BGD safe from the father?
I really can't answer that. All I can say is that it was probably an imperfect system and there was some degree of supervision, but probably not enough.
Do you recall yourself meeting with BGD's father?
No, I've got notes there that I've met him and that he didn't really want to say much.
He denied raping his daughter, didn't he?
I think that was the case. I can't even remember whether he actually said yes or no. I really can't remember that. I'd have to go back to that. But
You're meeting with
either way, it was pretty uncooperative. Yeah.
So your meeting with him would have made you aware of the fact that he was somebody who could not be trusted in the future, not to abuse his daughter again.
Yes, and even from the notes that I'd already got when I first saw her.
Okay. I'll just come to BGD 25, DHS.3002.326.0017_R. This is the note you referred to earlier. It's dated it says date seen, the 1st of August 1979.
Yes.
It's a progress report from yourself, is that right?
Evidently, yes.
Okay. And it notes BGD seems to have come to terms with her feelings about her father and expresses the need to keep away from him. Her relationship with her mother is more open now, she says. Both feel freer to talk about most things. She hopes to be accepted at Hillview. And the last line of that letter is, as you noted, your plan to follow her up for a period if she moves to Hillview.
Certainly.
If you go over to BGD 26.
Just that sentence there, I have not heard from her regional worker in terms of planning for BGD.
Okay.
And I think there was some mention about investigating possibilities.
All right. If you come to BGD 27, I'm sorry, DHS.3002.323.0249_E_R. This is a letter which is written by or signed by Jennifer Lyons, who you referred to earlier, and has your name down the bottom of it.
Certainly.
Do you see that?
Yes.
Have you had the chance to read this letter?
More than once. Several times.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said there, Dr.
Sorry, several times
You
I've
have,
read this
okay.
letter, and once again I heard Jennifer Lyons-Mitchell read it yesterday.
All right. Does the fact that your name is typed at the bottom suggest that you had a hand in the content of this letter?
That's what's been troubling me since I read it. I realise that it's quite possible that I did, but I really don't know. And when Jennifer was speaking yesterday, I got the impression that she was taking responsibility for that, but I can't say that that's the case or isn't.
All right. Her signature is on the letter and yours is just typed underneath. I'll just make that clear.
Yes.
And you don't have any personal memory of it yourself. Having read the letter several times, can I ask you about the sentiment of it? What it is, do you agree with me, is a letter to the father, which suggests it's written by Jennifer Lyons and yourself, that indicates that you understand that the father cares for her daughter. You don't want to make the father feel bad about what he's doing to BGD, but you're aware of the relationship and you want to try and resolve it in some way.
Yes.
What do you think now about the appropriateness of this letter?
That it was a very awkward situation. It could have been worded quite differently, I would have thought, in terms of probably being more confrontative.
Do you think a letter should have been written at all as part of the process?
Seeing that seeing that it was a bit difficult to engage him personally and verbally, then other attempts would be made to try and make some sort of contact with him.
Dr. Groom, what were you trying to achieve by engaging with him?
I suppose it was part of the culture at the time, Your Honour, of trying to work with families and trying to look at trying to work with the family system.
But this family system had a father who was committing serious offences
Yes.
against his daughter.
Yes.
Did that philosophy override?
I think sometimes it did. Over the family systems theory probably sometimes did override legal. Over the family systems theory probably sometimes did override legal requirements. Broken it was. There was a belief that somehow you could try and work with the family, no matter how, in the words, broken it was. There was a belief that somehow you could try and work with the family system to correct it.
Contained in that philosophy or understanding or culture of thinking, what was the understanding about the impact upon a child of an incestuous relationship being perpetrated upon...
Of her being safe.
No, I'm asking you actually something different. What was the understanding about the impact upon the child?
Of this letter? Or...
No, of her father raping her in this ongoing way, together with what the child was expressing clearly throughout all the material that's been provided to the Commission. Together with what the child was expressing clearly throughout all the material that's been provided to the Commission.
Looking at that in retrospect, I would have thought that very much it was an effort to try and tell him that everybody knew about evading it.
No, what you're actually answering is you're describing behaviour, but I'm asking you something different. I'm asking you about the psychological and emotional... What you're actually answering is you're describing behaviour, but I'm asking you something different. I'm asking you about the psychological and emotional impact upon the child of what was being perpetrated against her. What did you understand?
Oh, I understood that was extremely damaging and confusing for her, and I can't find enough negatives to describe that.
Was there an understanding by yourself in 1979 of the long-term impact that would have on her if the abuse continued?
Yes.
Did you get to see BGD's medical records as part of your case review?
I don't believe. I think they were just mentioned in the various documents I've seen, just in meeting minutes and so on.
Did a doctor or anybody from a clinic attend the weekly case reviews for children?
There was a medical doctor who, I think he was a GP or something, who visited sessionally, and I don't know whether sometimes I think he would have been. Couldn't tell you anything more about that.
Were you of the view that BGD...
With him, and that I think he might have been at meetings at times, but I couldn't tell you anything more about that.
Were you of the view that BGD may have sexual relations with anybody else other than her father as part of that rape?
No, I didn't see that as an issue for her.
Did you think that she was on any form of contraceptive at this time?
No, I see that it's mentioned there that she was on depot injection, Depo-Provera, and a young woman there at the time, which was a monthly depot injection, Depo-Provera, and I think that was something that was given, it's probably not routinely, but quite frequently to a lot of young women at the time.
Did you ever question the appropriateness of that?
No, I don't think I did.
Did you become aware at the time you were seeing BGD that she was being given Depo-Provera, the contraceptive?
I can only say that from the notes here. I can't say that I recall specifically that she was or wasn't on Depo-Provera. It seems to have been a fairly common practice at Winlaton at the time.
Dr Groom, you referred earlier to the fact that on BGD's, I withdraw that, you referred earlier to the fact that a report had been made about BGD's stepfather at one point to the police, BGD's grandfather who reported that sexual abuse, not anybody from the department.
I didn't know that.
And you noted earlier that you had been contacted by a former ward. You'd recommended that he not be released because you wanted to protect him from a pedophile neighbour.
Yes.
But he was released, and then that you had been contacted by a former ward. You'd recommended that he not be released because you wanted to protect him from a pedophile neighbour.
Yes.
But he was released, and then he was sexually abused.
That's what he told me.
At that point, no report was made by yourself or anybody else to the police about that pedophile?
I didn't have any ongoing contact with him. This is only something that he's told me this year through LinkedIn.
Did it appear to you that no report had been made by anybody to the police at the time the abuse was occurring?
I can't say that I remember. I don't remember his case specifically.
You obviously had some sort of concern that he would become the victim of the pedophile next door. You understand that that abuse of her continued for many, many years.
I understand that from a newspaper article that I found.
Well, you accept that, don't you?
Yes.
Do you see that reporting the abuse to the police would have been the best way to stop the abuse occurring in the future?
I agree with that, yes.
You know that BGD is listening to these proceedings,
yes,
or is likely to be. Is there anything that you want to say about your contribution to her care?
I agree with that, yes.
You know that BGD is listening to these proceedings,
yes,
or is likely to be. Is there anything that you want to say about your contribution to her care at that time?
Yes, I do want to say that things seem to have been bungled, and probably if we had intervened properly at the time, I can express that any stronger.
Thank you, Dr Groom. Nothing further.
Thank you. I'm very, very sorry about that. Don't know how I can express that any stronger.
Thank you, Dr Groom. Nothing further.
Thank you.
Mr O'Brien.
My name's O'Brien. I represent BGD.
Mr Stanton.
Your Honour, I'm sorry, I do have some questions of this witness.
Yes.
I'm in Your Honour's hands as to whether it's more appropriate that I follow Mr O'Brien or go before him.
You're representing this witness, aren't you?
No, I'm representing Ms Minister.
All right. Well, is there some reason that you want to go before Mr O'Brien?
No, I just thought I'd raise him so that Your Honour was aware of that.
All right.
details of any individual patient's or client from my work at the Children's Clinic.
That's correct.
You've said in your statement you can't recall specific details of any individual patient's or clients from my work at the Children's Clinic.
That's correct.
You've said that you've got no memory of the circumstances referred to in the various documents provided to me by the Commission.
That's correct, apart from having what I've actually read.
Registered with AHPRA, AHPRA,
Yes,
the registry body for practising psychologists such as yourself.
this is correct.
You've written AHPRA,
Yes,
the registry body for practising psychologists such as yourself.
this is correct.
You've written within the last 2 years and contributed to books.
Not in the last 2 years.
In 2013, you wrote, as you said to Council Assisting, a chapter titled Disorders of Childhood and Adolescence, Psychiatric Mental Health Nursing.
To be technical, I believe that was a new edition that was published under my name with another author updating it. I didn't write the actual...
You understand that?
Yes.
Information
Okay.
I expect that you might have had some say. And, well, I'm getting the information from your website. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Information.
Okay.
And, of course, psychiatric and mental health nursing was what you were doing between the years 1963 and 1986.
Yes.
It's about what we're largely talking to you about today, isn't it?
Certainly.
And it's about what we're largely talking to you about today, isn't it?
Certainly.
And it's what you're performing that type of clinical assistance to BGD over the period 1979. You're treating it, right? Needaspecialist.com website.
Certainly.
You're aware of that?
Yes.
Sir, when Council Assisting has taken you through these documents, you seem to suggest that you have no recollection now of their contents.
That's right.
You seem to suggest, sir, that you have no recollection now of the case itself.
That's correct.
So I want to suggest you're minimising your understanding of what you now
How do you mean?
You, I'm suggesting, do recall this case.
Oh, okay. I don't accept what you're stating.
That this case was a particularly confounding and difficult case for you when you were working there at Winlaton. You'd accept that even knowing the documents, right?
In the documents, yes.
Even having examined those documents, you'd now say to yourself, if your memory's as poorly affected as it is, you would say that this is a profoundly complex case.
I'd agree with you there.
And I want to suggest to you that having had a look at these documents had triggered your memory as to this particular young girl.
I can't say that it specifically triggers my memory. It brings forth a lot of emotions. I often react passionately to a lot of situations, and this has made me react quite passionately reading that. I can't say that I'm specifically remembering any of that any more than personal events that I've been through that I can't recall.
I want to suggest to you that even some of your answers today suggest that you have, even now, a memory of this young girl in your care at Winlaton in 1979.
That's because I didn't preface everything I said with according to my notes. I'm speaking as if every time I speak, as if I'm referring to my notes. I'm not talking about specific memory that I have. I'm talking about impressions. I'm talking about my reading of these documents supplied to me.
One of the things that you said in your evidence, sir, was that, I'm paraphrasing, you would have thought that this type of matter had been reported to the police.
Indeed.
You said you believe that you did encourage BGD to report to the police.
Yes.
You said that although those things were, sorry, withdraw that. You said that you didn't consider it your responsibility to report these things to the police.
Not overall, no.
Because she was a ward of the state.
And she was in the care of Winlaton, and decisions were being made at Winlaton and with the regional service responsible.
There about your inquiries as to whether it had earlier been reported to the police?
There's nothing there, no.
And indeed, if you go to BGD 21, and Council Assistant's taken to it already, the only thing that's in there in relation to the police is your active discouragement. Your active discouragement in going to the police.
That was what she requested that her grandmother not do.
Well, you actively discouraged the mother from going to the police, didn't you?
Yes, I can. Yes,
and
I
you
did.
did that on the telephone whilst BGD was in your office.
Because she asked me to do that at the time, and in retrospect, I
Excuse
see
me.
that as being something that a child that age shouldn't have been put into.
Thank you. Your evidence, when you answered Councillor Sissing's questions in relation to the visits that the father had at Winlaton, was that you didn't encourage it. You didn't encourage the father to visit the child.
No.
And you said that, in fact, you wouldn't have encouraged it. Was that your evidence?
I believe so.
There were two visits, at least, by the father to Winlaton over the period of 1979.
Yes.
It appears the first happened sometime in the week prior to the 30th of May 1979.
That's my understanding, yeah.
I'm drawing that from the notes.
Yes.
Your notes.
Yes. That's my understanding from my notes too.
And it's clear, and I think you've accepted that at that visit confirmed what BGD had been telling you and others about this relationship.
Indeed.
It confirmed what you had been told. It was a sexual relationship.
Yes.
Because the way in which I think you and others, at least reported to you, saw the relationship itself was corroborative of the fact.
Yes.
Corroborated the fact of what she'd said.
Yes.
And then there was a second visit on the 14th of June, 1979. That's right, isn't it? So the notes tell us. Your notes.
So the notes tell me, yes.
And again, that confirmed to you that this was a sexual relationship, that he was a sexual predator.
Yes, yes. That's the notes. Are you referring to one of the case meetings where that was described, and then I made notes in reference to that. So there was my handwritten notes, and there was some case report or something.
Yes,
Some
well,
meeting.
the notes certainly document on the second visit
Yes.
that the same sort of pattern of behaviour was exhibited by the father to the child.
Yes. And
Again confirming.
I want to put it on record that I disagreed with that visit.
You disagreed with that visit?
I wanted to see him individually. That was my intention.
How do you recall that?
From what I've written here.
You show me a note where you've actively you show me a note, or perhaps your counsel can, of where you have actively discouraged the second visit.
I haven't said that I discouraged it. I'm saying to you that the second visit, as I understand it, was the one that was approved by Maryland Minister, and it wasn't discussed with me.
How can you recall if it was discussed with you or not?
Because I had a memorandum that is there recorded as a document that the decision was made without reference to me. The decision was made, the father, I think, rang the day before.
Well, hang on.
Boris, do you want to?
Yes, Your Honour, I'd like to intervene. I appear for Dr Groom, Dr Boaz. I think the document that Dr Groom is referring to should be put on the screen. It's DHS 3002 323 0275 _E. The memorandum to Michael Groom from Maryland Minister. The witness can confirm if that's the memorandum that he's referring to.
Yes, that's the one somewhere.
Thank you, Your Honour.
That's the one.
Yeah. Where does that say that you discouraged that visit?
Doesn't say anything about that, but what I'm saying is that the memo from Maryland says, a father rang me yesterday to ask permission to visit BGD today, Wednesday, at 10:30 or 11 a.m. Permission granted. Perhaps you would like to arrange to see him then also. What I'm saying is I didn't know that was going to happen.
Okay.
Can you see from what's written there?
Don't ask me questions if you don't mind. I'm suggesting to you that there is nothing in between the first visit and the second visit, no documentation which has been revealed by the investigation by the Royal Commission, that you discouraged a second visit. Do you accept that?
If you say so, I can't remember whether there is or isn't any documentation about. I know that I was discouraging contact generally with the father, that I was forbidding. I was forbidding that he have contact with her generally. In fact, she was complaining of the fact that I wasn't allowing her to see him.
You see, you seem to have this recollection of actively discouraging a second visit, which was, it appears, approved, perhaps unbeknownst to you. But I'm suggesting that that is not a recollection you can possibly have.
All I can say is that from the time that, and I haven't got a sequence here, but my general approach was to discourage contact with her father.
You cannot have it both ways, Doctor. You can't say, I can't recall individual cases and then say, I recall discouraging a visit. First of all, do you accept that?
I'm going to make an objection to that question and the way it's put, Your Honour. My friend is entitled to a robust cross-examination of this witness, but the witness has made it perfectly clear that his recollection of the events is based on his reconstruction from the documents, and when he's been taken to that on several occasions, he's reconfirmed that position. So my friend should ask questions in my submission that are based on that understanding of the witness's statements on numerous times to that effect. If he has given evidence that contradicts that, then that's a different matter. But in my submission, that has not occurred.
Your Honour, the difference is, and I'll press the question, because the difference is this is not a recollection which is reconstructed based on the material. This witness says he can't remember, has the material, that doesn't assist him in recalling. So it's not a reconstruction of his evidence. I'm suggesting to him he can't possibly recall something if he says he's no memory of it. It's a fair comment. And it should be responded to, I respect.
Can I respond to that then,
Yes,
please?
you can, Dr.
Thank you. I'm trying to say that I can't recall the detail and that all that I've got here is the documents that were supplied to me. And on the basis of those documents supplied to me, I'm making these responses. And I'm sorry if I haven't made that clear enough, but that's what I've been doing.
I'm just going to ask you one question. There is nothing in the documentation that has been uncovered in this investigation demonstrating that you discouraged any visits, the first or the second visits. Do you accept that?
If you say so, I can't say that I did or I didn't. All I'm saying is that there was a general flavour in the things that I have read here that I was discouraging contact with the father. And that's all I can say.
I accept, in the premise of this question, I accept that you were discouraging contact with the father. But I want to suggest that the flavour of these documents suggests that you acquiesced in the visits of the father to Winlaton under supervision and you condone them.
I can't agree with that, I'm sorry.
Furthermore, you facilitated them by involving and engaging with the father. Do you accept that?
No, I don't accept that.
But you do accept that you did engage with the father.
I did.
And when you engaged with the father in or about after the second visit, or around the time of the second visit on the 14th of June 1979, I'm suggesting you never put it to him that you knew what was going on, did you?
I can't say that.
There's
I
nothing
can't say
suggesting in the
either way.
documents that you did.
I can't say either way.
In other words, there's nothing in the documents which would suggest that you confronted the father about being a sexual perpetrator on his daughter, is there?
I can't answer that unless I read my records of the interview. I don't think that it's reasonable for me to answer that question either way without... I've got something here which is DHS 3002 3230104E. And this is a review action sheet.
Sorry, just before you go, I'd like that displayed so I can find it myself.
Yes? Now this is, as I say, a review action sheet. It's not my written notes. Father visited, essential visit. Very close-knit, not normal. Father-daughter, not normal father-daughter relationship. Oblivious to everyone. Father saw Michael Groom. Interview revealed that father